What an exciting hour we have for you. I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I'm very glad to begin by giving the 21st reason for hope. The financial industry is now playing a critical role on the path toward a sustainable future. Its role is twofold. First of all, they are betting big on a clean energy future, and they know that clean energy is the wave of the future. Second, many of them are getting out of dirty fossil fuels because they understand that carbon-intensive energy sources like coal and oil represent bad bets for their bottom line. So let's look at the facts. This reason for hope comes because key financial institutions are realizing that dirty energy is indeed a bad investment. Now, full disclosure, I co-founded with my partner David Blood a firm called Generation Investment Management, which I serve as chair. So I am involved in this business and have been a vocal advocate warning people, along with my partner David Blood, about the coming carbon asset bubble. But we are far from the only ones. Let me give you the facts. This circle represents all of the carbon fuel that the world has burned since the beginning of the oil and coal age. First oil well wasn't really, the first oil wasn't discovered until the first oil well was drilled in the 1850s in Pennsylvania, and it joined with coal, and that was really the beginning of the carbon fuel age. If you look at how much of that total has been burned just in the last 14 years, it's represented by that small circle. Now here's the reason I'm putting those two circles up here. I'm going to put two more circles. This one represents all of the fossil fuel reserves, oil and coal and gas, that have already been discovered. They're proven, as they say in the industry. And it is a good bit more remaining to be burned, they think, compared to what the total is that's been burned over the last 160 years. Now, this small bubble in the middle is the amount that can be burned if we in the world are to have a 50-50 chance of remaining under the danger level of a 2 °C increase in global temperatures. Now, that 2-degree increase is already a political compromise. It's not really a scientific level, but it is a level that's so high that virtually all scientists would say any increase in temperature above 2 degrees is likely to be extremely catastrophic. But bear in mind, with only 1 degree, we're seeing the melting of the North Polar ice cap and these stronger storms and all the parade of horribles that people know about. So let's assume for the moment that we as a civilization come to our senses and decide, okay, the very most we can burn of the remaining carbon fuel is this much. And in the last 14 years, we burned this much. So what about the rest of it? That's been labeled the unburnable carbon. Well, the oil and coal companies carry this asset on their books at full value. And the investment community has treated it as if it's all going to be burned. It cannot be burned. Even if governments fail to act, the consequences from Mother Nature would create so much chaos, it would completely disrupt civilization's ability to use this fuel. So this is similar to something that we've been through very recently. Many people will remember the subprime mortgages that triggered the financial catastrophe of '07 and '08. Let's take a moment to review what happened there. The banks and financial institutions decided to sell mortgages to 5.5 million people in the U.S. alone who couldn't pay the mortgages back. They didn't get credit checks. They didn't make down payments. One stripper in Las Vegas bought 7 houses with subprime mortgages. So you might ask, what were those bankers thinking? Well, they were caught up in a herd mentality, and the ratings agencies had a very sketchy relationship with the banks, fraught with conflicts of interest, and they labeled these subprime mortgages AAA, the highest, most reassuring label they could give. And so they were complicated, so people decided, okay, we'll go along with this and assume that those subprime mortgages are okay. Well, they weren't okay, and when the economy started getting a little rocky, all of a sudden people realized, oh my goodness, the people who got these mortgages can't pay them back. So all of a sudden, the value of all those mortgages collapsed, and that's what triggered the global credit crisis, and then fast following, the Great Recession that caused so much economic hardship around the world. Well, these carbon reserves are subprime carbon assets. Everybody knows the famous cartoon sequence where Wile E. Coyote is chasing the Roadrunner, and he runs off the edge of the cliff, and his little legs keep on going while he's suspended in midair, and then reality takes hold and he falls down to the canyon floor. The people who believed that the subprime mortgages had full value were like Wile E. Coyote, and they fell to the canyon floor. The people who believe that this unburnable carbon is perfectly fine and is going to retain its full value are in the same situation. There is a day of reckoning coming. But this is one of the reasons why so many of these carbon fuel companies spend lots of money trying to put out illusions and create false doubts about the reality of the climate crisis. They want to hold off that day of reckoning as long as they can. Okay, so unburnable subprime carbon assets. Some of the most respected business leaders in the United States of America just put out a major report this past June called Risky Business. It included former secretaries of the Treasury and other very widely respected bipartisan business leaders. And they said if we continue on our current path on climate, many regions of the U.S. face the prospect of serious economic effects from climate change. Already, look at what's happening to the coal-burning utilities. 9 out of 10 European coal and gas plants are losing money. This is already beginning to happen. Last year, the top 20 utilities throughout Europe lost half of their value since 2008. German utilities, Reuters is reporting this, German utilities will struggle to make money from coal plants next year. This is already causing a major revolution. In 2010, for the first time in history, the global investments in renewables exceeded global investments in fossil fuel plants and assets. Now, it reversed with the discovery of shale oil, but this year it's coming back to that pattern. Bloomberg New Energy Finance says the full year figures for this year will show a clear rebound in those robust investment figures for renewable energy. So where does the investment in renewable energy come from? Most of it comes from the private sector, 62%. Only 38% from the public sector. So the investment marketplace is making a clear choice in favor of renewable energy, and that is a very powerful reason for hope. Citi says the age of renewables is beginning. They said that this past spring. Warren Buffett, well, people think he's a pretty smart business guy. He's invested $15 billion in wind and solar, and he's announced that he's ready now to invest another $15 billion in wind and solar. So maybe Warren Buffett doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't think many people are going to buy that assumption. He's known as one of the best investors in history. Look on the bond side. Look at what has been happening to green bonds. They are skyrocketing because of the need for massive financing for this explosion in the development of renewable energy. Carbon-based fuels are declining. The companies, many of them are losing money. They now have all these assets tied up in very sketchy reserves that are these subprime carbon assets, but the money is flowing toward the bet on a renewable future. But a lot of people have not tuned into this new reality, just as a lot of people did not wake up in time to avoid big losses from the subprime mortgage market. This is the second largest bank in the world, HSBC, just published a big report called Oil and Carbon Revisited: Value at Risk from Unburnable Reserves. One of their conclusions in this massive report is that investors have yet to price in, these risks. So there are some people like Wile E. Coyote who are hovering above the canyon floor. They have yet to price in these obvious risks that are going to be very dangerous for them. So Stanford University just announced that it will divest its coal assets. Not all carbon-based fuels, but there is a robust dialogue about the others as well. It joins 12 other colleges and 29 cities in divesting from these kinds of assets. Union Theological Seminary, we heard about them in one of the hours last night. They just this year divested their entire endowment from any fossil fuels. The University of Sydney in Australia has banned all new investments in coal. This is a global movement, and the Global Investor Coalition on Climate Change is one of the many organizations advocating a price on carbon in order to reduce emissions and the costs associated with carbon emissions. In the long term, going back to this massive and outstanding report released yesterday by the United Nations, if climate change is not tackled, economic growth itself is at risk. The fight against poverty, the fight to create more jobs, the fight to solve the climate crisis, it's all the same battle. It is all linked together. So why does it matter what the investment marketplace thinks? Well, it matters because they will decide where money is to be allocated. And it is a good indicator of what people who spend their lives trying to understand the future as best they can in fine-grained detail believe is more likely than not to happen. And the fact that the investor community is moving very powerfully toward renewable energy and expressing more and more reservations and queasiness about continuing to bet on risky carbon assets says a great deal about what they think about the future of the global marketplace and the future of our civilization. We don't need another subprime mortgage catastrophe. There are now $21 trillion in carbon assets that cannot be burned. $7 trillion held by multinational, publicly traded corporations. Some of them have addressed this issue and have tried to wish it away. But the smarter investors, in my opinion, are beginning to progressively withdraw their investments from these dirty, dangerous, and risky carbon-based investments. This is a major development. And of all the 24 reasons for hope that we will solve the climate crisis and we will navigate this transition to renewables. The fact that the investment marketplace is moving so powerfully is definitely the 21st reason for hope.